Hi, good afternoon. Welcome to our web talk or fireside chat with Professor Henry Mintzberg, a very good friend of FDC. I would like to thank our partner Phil LeNir from Coaching Ourselves for making it happen. Phil is also a member of the FDC International Advisory Council. My name is Viviane Barreto. I am the Associate Dean for Global Strategy at FDC, and I am delighted to host this chat. It is very special to have the two co-founders of Coaching Ourselves on the web talk. Coaching Ourselves is an initiative for managers to learn together from their own experience in their own workplace. Hi, Phil. Could you say a few words about Coaching Ourselves and our partnership?
Thank you very much, Vivian, and hello, everybody. Coaching Ourselves is an organization that I started with Professor Mintzberg about 13 years ago now. And I'd say about, crikey, it's been at least 5 or 6 years that we've been working with FDC. I still remember when Vivian and her colleague came up to Montreal during the winter, and we started working together many years ago. And FDC has really been the perfect partner for us because our values are aligned, and working with FDC and their focus on society and helping society at large in Brazil has been brilliant, and Coaching Ourselves is of course a great vehicle for them to do that. So thank you very much, everybody, for coming to listen to us today.
Thank you, Phil. Thank you. We are delighted to be so close to you. Who is with us today? We have a group of C-level executives from large organizations, clients of FDC, and some special guests such as members of FDC International Advisory Council, plus guests from partner business schools. What is important to know to make our chat work well? We will keep your microphone and video closed. And if you would like to make any question or comment, please click on the chat or on the Q&A and write a message, and I'll do my best to accommodate and address them, okay? After the chat, we will email you a copy of a Coaching Ourselves module, the Rebalancing Society module, written by Henry Mintzberg. And for more information about Henry, please reach www.mintzberg.org. Thank you for being here and joining our web talk. Henry, it is really a big pleasure to have the chance to talk to you today. And very nice to have a fireside chat. That is perfect, and it couldn't be like any more real, right? It really is a big honor. We are all very lucky to have the chance to learn from your researches and experience. And thank you so much for your time and generosity. Let me say a few words to introduce you. Well, not sure if introductions are needed when talking about Henry Mintzberg, right? But anyway, Henry Mintzberg is a writer and educator, mostly about managing originations, developing managers, and rebalancing societies, where his attention is currently focused. He is currently the Cleghorn Professor of Management Studies at the Faculty of Management at McGill University in Montreal, where he has been teaching since 1968. Henry has authored over 20 books, including Managers Not MBAs, Simply Managing, Rebalancing Society, and Managing the Myths of Healthcare. Also 180 articles, plus numerous commentaries and videos. Henry now publishes a regular blog, very, very interesting. It's a tweet to blog. You find out in his www.mintzberg.org, very interesting. And a collection of his blogs was recently published under the title of Bedtime Stories for Managers. Some consequences of all these have been his election to the Order of Canada and the L'Ordre National du Québec, as well as to the Royal Society of Canada, the first from a management faculty. 2 prize-winning Harvard Business Review articles, and 20 honorary degrees from universities around the world. Well, what an honor to have you with us. Well, Henry, let me start our fireside chat by asking you about your reading of what we are all going through. As we were discussing the other day, like our globe is in the middle of this pandemic. Our institutions and leaders are struggling to adapt. And well, can this be the beginning of the broader change that we require so desperately? I would love to hear your reading of what's going on now.
Okay, Viviane, thank you. I'm sitting by the fireside in our house in the country because we're not supposed to go anywhere. We can't go anymore to our apartment in the city. It's blocked off. And so I take walks around the place, and the lake is still frozen, but it's nice. It's about 10 degrees here, which for us is balmy compared to you. So it's delightful to be here. You know, one of the things that struck me, I have been spending a few years concerned about the imbalance in society, the imbalance between 3 sectors: public sector, private sector, and what I call plural sector or community. Brazil is very, very strong in community, probably one of the strongest in the world, and has a strong public and a private sector. What strikes me about what's going on now, you know, I think what's becoming clearer and clearer is that each sector has its job. And for the public sector is to protect us. In times like this, we expect the public sector to protect us. In all times, we have police forces and so on to protect us. But in these times, we have health departments and we have equipment and hospitals and so on. We expect protection from the government. We expect the business sector, the private sector, to supply us with goods, with services, with masks and with respirators and all kinds of things. And we turn to the private sector. The plural sector, which is less known, less realized, and by plural I mean community sector, is really what engages us. It's really where we work together, and no place like that as strong as Brazil, probably. And the plural sector engages us. So if you look at countries that have different responses, more effective and less effective, it seems to me that the countries that have been able to balance those 3 roles cooperatively do better because they can work together, they can function together. And the ones that are apart and separate with too much power, either in government or too much power in business or too much power in community, like Venezuela, in a sense of a community group that took over power, are doing worse. So that's how I see it now. And maybe when this is over, we'll recognize that we have another problem that's more continuous, that's going to come back and face us again, the imbalance in so many countries.
Yeah, well, could you please share with us some of the lessons that you have already learned from what we're going through?
Well, you know, it's funny because I'm not I wrote the book on healthcare and I understand lots of things about healthcare. I'm not a physician. I'm not a healthcare permanent person, but I'm surrounded. We have our program called the International Masters for Health Leadership, which has had good representation from all over the world, including Brazil. And so we have an alumni from the last 10 years who are all over the place. One is right in the middle. One of our alumni is right in the middle of the World Health Organization response group, for example. Another one ran Doctors Without Borders worldwide for the last 8 years. And so we've put together, actually we didn't, the alumni and the current students put together a group and we have Zoom calls, 2 hours, sometimes every single day, to get into these. And that's where my interest started to look at what I call anomalies. There are things going on that are curious. And the most curious thing for me is the utter belief that it's coming, it's coming, it's coming. everywhere I read, it's coming, it's coming, it's coming. And when I look up the favelas, the same thing. It's coming, it's coming, it's coming. There are cases in the favelas, but everybody said, well, it's coming, just a matter of time. Well, it didn't come to Vietnam, which borders China. It didn't come to Mongolia, which borders China. It hasn't come to the south of Italy. A very good friend in the south, in her own region, a few days ago, she said, Henry, we don't have a single case here. And then a few days later, the next day, she said, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. We have one case. And so I started to ask, why this? Why did it stop in that part of China? Why did it stop in South Korea? And we came across a study in Italy that suggests that there's another form of transmission that nobody's recognizing, that the virus seems to attach to molecules in polluted air, and which can't travel very far, but they could travel a few hundred meters. And so a lot of it could be spreading in polluted air. And as you were just mentioning, Sao Paulo may have the most cases and the most polluted air in the country. In which case, I don't know if some people are going to be happy about this, in which case we've got to get the pollution out of the air urgently, if what I'm saying is true. And that means closing a lot of plants, a lot of power stations that are polluting. It's not proven. It just looks very suspicious.
Yeah. Well, very, very interesting the way that you make a parallel between the findings of the COVID-19 and the practices of management that we really need to understand and observe and carefully listening what's going on. Otherwise, the paradigms will make us look very clearly at some things, but will make us very blind to other things. We are going to have lots of blind spots for sure.
Yeah.
And
that's something before you go on. A lot of it is about balance. You know, I mentioned balanced society. I mentioned balance in dealing with the outbreak, the coronavirus. Balance in management. The really effective C managers and all managers there's a sense of balance in managerial teams between what I call art, craft, and science. Too much science, too much analysis is bad management. Too much art can be crazy management. That's what's in the White House. And too much crap. But together, that's balance in running companies. No voice.
Vivian, you are muted.
thank you. Now I think it's working better, right?
Yeah.
I have a question for you from my colleague Viviane Barreto. She's asking do you think if this crisis will give rise to a new economic system, or do you foresee drastic changes in capitalism?
You know, there was a smart fellow in Denmark who once said, I never predict, especially the future. I think what also biases prediction is that the optimists predict what they like and the pessimists predict what they don't like. So I'm happy to predict what I like, which is yes, not a new form of capitalism, a new form of balance in society. Capitalism is terrific. I love my laptop. I wouldn't be speaking to you now without capitalism, without Zoom, without the laptop, without all kinds of things. I love capitalism in its place, which is the marketplace and out of the political place. And in the United States, business is so dominant, that it's distorting the whole country, and they don't even realize it. Every solution to the American problems is to fix capitalism. I have a list of about 8, caring capitalism, progressive capitalism. I love democratic capitalism because democratic is the adjective and capitalism is the noun, like which is more important. So it's not just capitalism needs fixing, and stock markets really need fixing because they just drive companies crazy with more and more and more. But society needs fixing in terms of balance. And that means capitalism in its place, just like government in its place, just like communities in their place.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Let me ask you another question. Now it's regarding the balance between e-commerce and physical stores markets right after the end of pandemic. Do you believe in an accelerated rebalancing between the e-commerce and physical stores right after the end of pandemic? Like, what's your view about that?
Well, it's going to be interesting to see, isn't it? Because there may be two factors. Who knows? One is that people who have stopped shopping for a few months, my credit card doesn't change at all, except what they deliver here from the supermarket for older people. I'm an older person, so they deliver. So that's the only thing that ever appears on my statement. So people may get used to doing a lot less shopping, which could change things. They may get used to working at home. Everybody always liked to work at home. I used to work at home 70%. Now I work at home 100%. It's not that different. And that means, and all these new things we're doing with Zoom, you're going to have trouble getting me down to Sao Paulo or Bele to give a talk, because we can do it this way. I stay home, I take a walk, I come back 15 minutes early, and here we are. So that could have an enormous effect.
Well, another question connected to that is that I have Guilherme Castro. He wrote down that you discussed about balancing society. And he asks, how do you consider companies have to rethink their business models, especially in order to find this balance between the stakeholders? And he also writes, in fact, it is not, however, urgent in this scenario. I would love to hear your comments on that.
Well, the stakeholder model, it seems to me, is obvious. But the Business Roundtable in the United States, the most senior chief executives of the major companies, came out with a statement last year that got all kinds of publicity about it's not shareholders, it's stakeholders. Well, in 2012, they came up with the same statement. And what happened between 2012 and 2019? They didn't do anything. I mean, some did, of course, but on average, things got worse. They didn't get better. So statements are useless. Statements are useless. Action is useful. I mentioned the stock market before. I think patient capital is a lot more healthy for everybody, including business. You start a company, you're an entrepreneur, you're really with it, you understand your company, you do really, really well, and then you go on the stock market, with an IPO, and suddenly the analysts are all over you, more. Apple passes $1 trillion in sales, and you know what? That's the starting point. That's the starting point. We need more. $1 trillion's not enough. Well, it's sick. It's absolutely sick. It just drives companies crazy. So the big companies get destroyed morally and sometimes literally by the stock market. And of course, people cash out, so they don't care. So we've got, I'm a big fan of entrepreneurs, I was chatting with Ricardo Semler a couple of days ago, at least on email. He's an old friend. He's got a new thing going all the time. He's a real entrepreneur, and this is the heart of the economy.
Henry, and do you have like an idea of when economy will be back, not to exactly how the numbers that we were seeing in the past days or months, but what is your idea of recovery of economy?
That's impossible to predict, but let's just go by evidence. In China, I'm not sure, 2 or 3 months. Now, is it stopped? I don't know. I'm going to come back to that in a second. Same thing in South Korea. So that's the only indicators we have now. That doesn't mean they just went back to normal in Wuhan, I think today, or the last couple of days. So, and I think it started in December, January. So that may be an indication. But let me say something about what I said before. If my crazy idea, it's not my idea, but if the crazy idea that, that the disease is transmitted through polluted air, okay, that could explain why it stopped in Wuhan and Korea. Okay, because people stopped driving, they had to stay home, the air cleared, it stops. If they go right back, it may start again. I don't know. But that could be an explanation for why it stops, in which case, if we want to stop it, we may have to really look immediately at the condition of the air.
Yeah, very, very interesting. And well, I would like to suggest you who are joining us to take a look at Henry's blog, where he talks about the investigations and the ideas that he's bringing for the causes and analysis of COVID-19. And there he mentions about the pollution and the effect. So it's a very nice reading. Henry,
to add quickly, just add quickly, the first one, part one, which is actually lower down on the blog, part one is about identifying the anomalies, identifying what doesn't seem, and part two is about explaining them. So if you go on the blog, you're going to end up in part two, which is fine. You can read that by itself, or if you want, you can read part one below it, and then come back to part two.
Yeah, it really is very interesting. Henry, I would like to ask you to please tell us a little bit about your idea of bottom-up management to the major problems we face, like from the pandemic to climate change and all the challenges that we have outside and inside our organizations. I would love to hear your comments.
Yeah, I missed the word when you said some kind of management. What was the word? Something.
Yeah, the idea of bottom-up management.
Oh, bottom. Okay. Yeah, I missed that. You know, I'm starting to wonder if I should not call it bottom-up, but just call it grounded, because again, it's still up. It's still up. So a lot of management happens on the ground. It happens because people on the ground who aren't necessarily managers come up with amazing ideas. And if the culture is healthy, those ideas get to other people and they institute it. That's how IKEA got into furniture the way they did. It was an idea of a worker. And entrepreneurs usually are on the ground. They're not sitting in offices reading financial statements. I mean, some of that, but they're on the ground. You know, a fellow built a big supermarket chain in Canada. He used to shop in his stores every Saturday. He used to drive around the city and say, that's where I'm going to put my next store. Okay, that point, that's the good point. He was on the ground. He was connected, and that's necessary. And what you're seeing in the White House, for example, is about as far from the ground as you can possibly conceive. And maybe people like Cuomo, the governor of New York, is probably much more on the ground. But all management, I don't care if you're running the biggest company in the world, or you're running government, or you're running a big NGO, you've got to connect with what's on the ground. You can't manage above. It's, you know, if you see yourself on top, then you don't know what's happening on the bottom.
Thank you, Henry. Henry, I would like to ask you to share with the people who are joining us the story and the reflection that you bring in your latest book, Bedtime Stories for Managers, where you talk about managing scrambled eggs. And I believe it's so proper to what we're going through that we really need to listen, right? To understand. That's what you mean, right?
Yeah. I was going to call the book Managing Scrambled Eggs originally. The story, the first story in the book, called Managing Scrambled Eggs, is about managing on the ground in the air. because it's a story about the chief executive. It's a story about flying in what at the time was the largest airline in the world, okay? That went bankrupt not long after, but it was the largest airline in the world. And I flew it from Montreal to New York, and they served these things they called scrambled eggs. And I said to the flight attendant, I have eaten bad food on airlines, but never anything this bad. And she said, I know we keep telling them they won't listen. Now, how could they not listen? How could they not listen? If you're running a cemetery and you don't speak to your customers, okay, I understand. But if you're running an airline, how could you not listen? And then I found out, somebody told me, the chief executive used to fly first class. They actually one time they bumped a paying passenger to make a seat empty for him in business class. Okay, that guy should have been fired on the spot. He drove that organization into the ground. Because he wasn't on the ground, he drove it into the ground.
Yeah, I believe it's extremely important. And I also would like to ask on behalf of some of the participants that are addressing some questions, what are the changes that you already can foresee for the managers in terms of leadership after the COVID-19?
As I said, I don't like to predict, but I think everybody will go back to business as usual for starters. Whether they'll be able to continue to get away with it, I don't know. Maybe people will become more discerning. I don't know, but half the population of the United States is supporting Trump. So, God, no more comment on that.
Well, another question now from Genevieve Poulan from Schema Business School. She asks that after several months of isolation, do you think that the world will be more reasonable because this time of distancing will have allowed us to reflect? Do you think we'll have realized how much social interactions other than virtual are of great value? This is perhaps a question of an idealist.
I hope so. But we have to ask ourselves why we don't reflect. I think we don't reflect for many reasons. We're inundated with dogma from the economists who keep telling us that greed is good and markets are everything. They just make us mindless. We're inundated with advertising, half of which or most of which lies in one way or another. It's not outright lies, it just doesn't tell the whole story. Will people be more discerning? I wonder. We're so distracted by everything that we can't stop and think. We're incapable to stop and think because we're so distracted. Will that change? You know, I don't know. I really don't know. I hope so.
Harry, I would like to revisit the ideas that you brought in the article, The 5 Mindsets of a Manager. That I think that it's extremely up to date. And also when we connect, for example, to coaching ourselves, that if I had to define coaching ourselves in 2 words, those would be reflection and dialogue. And that seems to be what is lacking right now. So when we revisit all your researches and the books, you keep reinforcing the importance of reflection, right? And once I watched one of your videos where you said that, you know, you didn't do anything super. You just, you know, took some time and realized what managers do. When I say manager here, it doesn't have to be like the role manager, but you manage something. And I'm saying that just to make the distinction between leadership and managers. Who would like to have a manager that is not a leader, or vice versa? And what do you see in terms of differences from now and comparing to the years back there, because since the speech is the same, you talk about managers being interrupted all the time. And in the past, they were interrupted by other sources of interruption. And now we have the big crisis and the speed of everything going on. Could you please make some comments on that?
Well, first of all, I've been writing about this for a long time, and it's been getting steadily worse. And I think it's because of stock markets and certain kinds of management programs that are very narrow and too analytical and too focused on numbers and so on and so forth. So I make myself feel better by saying, well, maybe if I didn't write all that, it would be even more worse. Because I don't see it getting better. It gets worse. And I think we have to deal with the underlying forces like stock markets that are horrible, and you know, programs for management that promote a very narrow kind of management, and this obsession with an economic model that's extremely narrow and extremely destructive, about markets are everything, and you know, and greed is good, and all that nonsense. So I think we have to sort of, you know, get that better. Managing sits between reflection and action. Reflection in the abstract, action on the ground. If you only reflect in the abstract, you're a top manager who doesn't know what's going on. If you're only on the ground, then you know what's on the ground, but you can't step back from it. And so all our programs, our IMPM program, which, you know, having wonderful Brazilian attendance for years, is about sort of between reflection and action. And they sit in round tables and they share their experiences and so on. So they bring their action to the classroom and then they reflect. One of the things that strikes me with what you read and referred to earlier about my kind of my blogs and so on, is the reaction I'm getting from my medical colleagues is science, science, science. You know, Henry, you can't just shoot your, they don't use that word, but you can't just shoot your mouth off about these things. You got to prove it. And I say, how many more people have to die before we prove it? You know, I mean, we have to do. So we had a discussion, and one physician who's very well-known researcher and physician, he says, oh, I could design a really good experiment to test that. It was about whether there seems to be some evidence that a vitamin D deficiency makes your condition worse when you get the virus. Okay, so I said, oh, let's study vitamin D. Let's find out who's taking vitamin D. And maybe there's a relationship between places where people take more vitamin D or get more sunshine and places where they get less. And he said at that point, you know, I could design a really good experiment. I said, design a really good experiment, call a few pharmaceutical companies, ask them whether they're shipping vitamin D. It'll take you 10 minutes. You know, action, not all this science nonsense. I don't mean science is nonsense. I mean, science like management is about art, craft, and science. And it's all science. I don't hear art. I don't hear craft. I don't hear ideas of art. I don't hear the trying things of craft. All I hear is science, science, science. As long as we're stuck in that view. And that pervades management. You know, people are so, I think they're afraid to think differently because maybe they won't belong, you know? Maybe they feel they won't belong if they come up with an unusual idea or they support an unusual idea. So.
Well, that's very interesting.
Viviane, I have a very thick skin. You could probably see very thick. And so I don't care how many people condemn me. I just go forward. I don't care.
Yeah,
Viviane,
well, yes, please go ahead.
May I ask a question of Henry? Henry, we've been working for many, many years, and I'm actually truly curious as I'm listening to you share these things. What, as a result of this sort of COVID and the changes, what are some of the key things that have changed in your thinking as a result of this experience? You know, before COVID and now as we're in the middle of it, how has that changed some of the ideas that you had before or added new ones?
Well, it's interesting, Phil, because maybe I'm suffering from the same thing that I'm blaming all these scientists and medical people are, but it's reinforced my thinking. It's made me even more sure about rebalancing society. It's made me even more sure about my own intuition. It's made me even more sure that Trump has never had an intuitive idea in his life. Okay, so it's reinforced the things I believe, which means I'm going to be even more of a terror after this than ready.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And I would like to go back to once that we were talking and you mentioned that the easy fixes are not working now. And I think that it also refers to heroic leadership. And, you know, it's not going to work. And the solution, it's not going to come out of a single sector, but that's going to be a result of a dialogue, right? Of different thinking. And people, well, I think that the context requires thick skin, right?
Yeah. Requires which, sorry?
Thick skin.
Yeah, thick skin, but an open mind.
Yes, an open mind. Yes.
You know, I've never been a fan of heroic leadership. I am a fan of great leaders, but they don't take themselves that seriously. They're people who are devoted. They're on the ground. They're absolutely obsessed with making their companies or their governments or whatever they're running better. They're not sort of. I mean, I don't want to go on about Trump. The man is a monstrosity. He's just plain a monstrosity. He's so far beyond anything conceivable. And what I fear most for the United States is that half the population still thinks, I don't know what's in the water, what they're drinking. And it's not left or right. I don't care if it's left or right. I don't care if there can be right-wing leaders or government people who are intelligent and thoughtful. You know, it's not left or right. It's you think or you don't think.
Thank you. Well, I will ask you a question that was written by Jorge Roldão. He asks, in your fantastic book, Rebalancing Society, you say that the triumph of imbalance is destroying democracies, societies, and ourselves. Does business management suffer from lack of respect and schizophrenia in relation to reality?
Do they suffer from what?
Schizophrenia.
Oh, schizophrenia.
Yes, in relation to reality. What do you think about it?
Yeah, I never thought about it with that word. But yeah, in the sense of being responsible, you know, on one hand, you're getting pressure from people on the ground, the customers and employees and so on. And on the other hand, you got the stock market analysts driving you crazy about how much profit did you make this week, you know, or how much sales did you increase this week. And it's very hard to run a business when you're distracted by those kinds of pressures. So the short-term pressures are just absolutely, utterly destructive. And the really great companies are just, they're solid, they know what they're doing it well. You know, I always think when it's, instead of more, we could be doing better, you know, that we don't have to increase sales and increase profits pointedly. We can do better and get more profits because we're doing better and better. We're producing better products with happier customers instead of just more. And it kills the environment because, you know, it's just throwing away so much stuff.
And well, going back to companies are struggling now, large companies, small companies. What would you say about changes in consumer habits, and like Uber, for example, other new business models? Would you have some ideas to share?
Well, Uber is an interesting case because on one hand, it's a brilliant, absolutely brilliant business model. I mean, it's really thought through carefully and very, very cleverly. And partly that's its success, and partly its success is on the back of taxi drivers because they invest to get taxis, and then Uber turns around and pays people far, far less, and is succeeding partly because of that. And governments aren't protecting the taxi drivers who they forced to buy permits. And I don't know why they're not being sued for screwing the taxi drivers. So Uber, on one hand, it has a lovely business model, and on the other hand is a pit bull. It's a nasty, nasty company, or at least it was under its founder. I'm not sure that's changed very much. But there are other companies that aren't nasty, that have good business models. Maybe Airbnb, I don't know. I don't get the negative impression about them. Amazon is being accused of not treating its workers well. I don't know, but Amazon is certainly enhancing service to people. It's kind of like, why don't you treat everybody well? You're doing so well. Stop being so damn greedy. Share it. Costco, I don't know if you have Costco in Brazil, but Costco is a retail chain that pays its employees much better and retains their employees much easier and does really, really well. You couldn't get into the parking lot of Costco anytime until now. Now, obviously, they're restricting people coming in, but in numbers. But so, you can do well and treat people well, and it's awful. It's awful how some very, very successful businesses have treated people so badly.
Viviane, you are muted.
No voice.
No voice. But Viviane.
Thank you, Phil. Go ahead.
Viviane, I'm going to take this opportunity to ask the question from Pedro, because this is a very relevant question to something that Henry and I talk about. So a colleague here from FDC writes, Henry, how to engage business, social, and public leaders in the theme of rebalancing society, since most of them have no idea of their role in this rebalancing? And of course, for everybody here, this is a discussion that Henry and I have been having for a number of years, and I'd like to hear Henry's thoughts that he's going to share.
Well, of course, Phil, we now have a topic on rebalancing society, so that's a good place to start. Obviously, the question was asked by someone who read the book, presumably, so I can't say read the book. But it seems to me we're living the consequences of imbalance everywhere we go, everywhere we turn. I call my phone company, to cancel a line, okay? To cancel an iPhone line. And the woman takes all the information, and then she says, thank you, now I have to turn over to somebody else who will confirm it. So I go to somebody else, go through everything again, give all the information again. Then she passes me to a third one, at which point I blew my top, not that it's her fault. I blew my top, and I said, you know damn well the only reason you're doing this is to discourage me from canceling the account. And that should be criminal, for God's sakes. It's absolutely, utterly irresponsible. You know how many big companies are doing that constantly? How many banks are doing it? How many phone companies are doing it? I can count the companies who are not doing it on my hands. But so many companies. I talked about Costco. I think Costco seems very decent. But so many companies are playing so many games in every way, that I have a whole list of them. And people should read another thing I wrote called Donald Trump is Not the Problem. It's got 5 parts to it. It's on my blog. But it reminds me, Phil, on my homepage, mm-hmm. or on a page, a separate page called the Rebalancing Society page with dashes, but it's on my homepage. On the cover of the Rebalancing Society book, there's all kinds of other things to look at, like we have a Declaration of Interdependence, what we could sign up to. So people could go there, they go to mintzberg.org, they see the homepage, they see the page for Rebalancing Society, all kinds of things to look at in terms of what you can do. There's a table there. There's a specific table there that offers about 32 ideas for how to rebalance society. You just click on them. So one of them is about the stock markets. One of them is about getting rid of the economic dogma. One of which is, pressuring our governments to do certain kinds of things. There's all kinds of things there. So that's the place to look, is on the table, a table for rebalancing society.
Right. And if I could just add to everybody out there listening, that's a very good question. And if you have ideas, please call us or send it through. The idea of how to get people to engage in rebalancing society, the business leaders, the public leaders, and the not-for-profit leaders. Over to you, Viviane.
Oh, thank you, Phil. Henry, if I ask you for an advice that you could give to the people who are participating here that are responsible for the strategy of important businesses, mostly here in Brazil, what would be the main advice for the people who are managing people, business, and supply chains in times of COVID-19?
In any times, I said it before, but I'll say it again. Brazil is a wonderful country. I love Brazil. And what I love most about Brazil is the sense of community and the community organizations. Brazil has done so many interesting, clever things around community activities of all kinds, and that's what you need to leverage in Brazil if you're running companies. That there are government relationships. Too many companies like Petrobras have had very distorted relationships with government, but it's time to turn those relationships to community groups and use community groups, and they can help you, you can help them. And I think that's number one for Brazil. You've got a wonderful resource in the country everywhere.
And now an advice for the world of education to contribute to this more balanced world. What do you think that the path is already found with this young generation who really expresses their desire to change the world? Young people no longer dream of a high salary position, but of evolving positions that allow them to learn and create positive impacts on society. That's a question. Schools will have to evolve very quickly, right? Could you please share your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because the if I can utter a different word, the FGV works with us on our International Masters Program for Managers, and the FDC works with us on Coaching Ourselves, one with McGill and one with Phil, and the company Phil and I have. And so it's getting into the system because we've got to stop this idea that we're creating managers in a classroom. You don't create a manager in a classroom. You create a technocrat in a classroom if they don't have experience. What you do is bring experienced people into the classroom or into Coaching Ourselves, and you give them a chance to reflect, back to that word, to reflect on their own experience using and share their experience and find out how they can do it better. The interesting thing about Coaching Ourselves now is that you can do it through Zoom with these conditions. You don't have to actually physically get together. So it's another interesting way of doing it. So these things are open. If they go to coachingourselves.org, or you've got an equivalent site in Portugal, in Brazil. If you go there, you can see kind of what it's about. It's a whole different way of thinking about creating managers. If you want to be a manager, you're not going to become a manager in a classroom any more than you're going to learn how to swim in a classroom.
Yeah, it has to be very practical, right? The concepts and the experience. That's the fundamentals, right? Yeah, that's very, very important. Yeah. Henry, before we go to the closing part, I would like to leave the space open. Is there anything that I didn't ask you that you would like to share with us that would be another source of inspiration?
No, I don't think so. Just to reiterate that Brazil is such a wonderful country, and Brazil can be a balanced country. For many years, it's been a balanced country, and I'm not allowed to talk politics, but my wish is that it use its great people and its great strength to Brazil, to me, should be the model for the world of how a country can be balanced.
I love when you say that Brazil is the why not country, right?
Yeah, the Brazilian people are why not people. They're not why people, sort of always why, but the Brazilians are why not people. Sure, what the hell, break a branch, find your way around. I can't pronounce it in Portuguese, but break a branch, find your way around, find a way. Yeah, why not? Why not? And why not become the model for the world?
Very good. Well, now, last question. I have Marcelo Costa asking about the strategy, just not to close the conversation without revisiting the strategy side. He asks if you can recommend the best tools or approaches to plan and execute strategy, not only through the coronavirus crisis, but also after it, based on the lessons learned during the crisis. Would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, I would like to comment on that, because it's not about planning or executing strategy. Nobody on the face of the earth ever created a strategy by planning. You don't plan a strategy, you learn a strategy. You don't just execute a strategy, because that assumes that the strategy is perfect and everybody else implements. And then when it fails, who gets blamed? Implementation or execution always gets blamed, but it's formulation that has to get blamed, because the formulators knew who they were implementing for. So therefore, but it's not about formulation and implementation, it's about learning. It's about formulating and implementing together as you go along. You try something, it doesn't work, you try something else, it works, you do more of it. You learn your way to a strategy. You don't plan your way to a strategy. I don't know if the book is translated, but I did a book called The Rise and Fall of Strategic Planning. There's lots on my website and on my blog about that, and so on.
Yeah, it's important, even to the discussions that we are seeing nowadays, because a lot of people is talking about the scenarios and designing strategies. So I think it's a very nice point that you bring.
Yeah.
Very,
Good.
very interesting.
Good.
Phil, would you like to comment something or add something?
Well, I was just thinking about what Henry was talking about with the strategy, and I'm sure lots of people can work very hard to make lots of plans around what they can do given what might happen. But I'll bet you that none of those plans are going to be very useful, because it's totally not clear what's going to happen. So focus on what we're all doing, which is muddling our way through this and doing the best we can to go through this, which means learning and figuring things out. And
being wide open to ideas, being absolutely wide open to ideas.
Yeah, I'll highlight, Henry, that's a new thought that you shared with me today, and I'm gonna keep that in mind. When we first spoke about this and you started talking to me about some of these other ideas, I reacted like some of your scientist colleagues. I'm like, oh, but that's not scientific. How can Henry say that? And because it's not based on science. But then I go back to all the stuff that I've seen you do, and it's observation and inductive thinking that tends to lead to the new thoughts rather than the pure scientific method. Thank you. Very cool.
Well, thank you, Viviane.
Well, thank you, Henry. Thank you, Phil. Unfortunately, our time is about over. I would like to once again thank you so much for your time and for being part of this chat. We have a lot of people joining us. Thank you so much. Henry, all my respect and admiration. You know, it's wonderful to have you and Phil being very close friends of FDC. We are delighted to have the chance to interact with you so often and to exchange ideas. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I thank you, and I hope to see you who are participating soon. Next week, we are going to have a web talk with Jonathan Gosling, and I hope to see you there. And we are going to email you a copy of the Coaching Ourselves module, Rebalancing Society. And if you would like to have more information about it, just let us know. I'm sure that you will find it very, very interesting and very practical to exercise with your team. I would like to thank you so much and ask if Phil or Henry would like to make any comments before we finish.
Thank you, Viviane. Thank you for doing this, and keep well.
You too, keep well. You too, Phil.
Ditto on that. Keep well, everybody.
Thank you. Keep well, everybody. Thank you so much. See you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.